my being a storyteller was, I felt on a very strong level, it was almost a prophetic invitation or a calling to begin to discover what Africa was before the world told us what we were. Before Africa was demarcated, divided, constructed in what it is today, as a people, as a place, as a culture, who were we? But I asked myself, what if Africa was never colonized? What type of stories are we going to tell about ourselves?
Ferdy Adimefe is the founder and CEO of Magic Carpet Studios, an innovation storytelling company focused on highlighting authentic African stories on the map of global entertainment through film and animation. The company is also working on one of Africa's first original homemade animation films as they create a 2D version of the 1960 Passport of Mallam Illia novel. Welcome, my people, to Noble Conversations. We're a platform that aims to build the Nigeria and society of our dreams by engaging in what? I didn't hear you. Louder, louder, louder. Noble conversations, exactly. With those who are making community and global impact. And today we'll be having a conversation with Ferdy Adimefe, a noble conversation, in fact, with him on telling authentic African stories, the direction of the Nigerian creative industry, and the work his team at Magic Studios or Magic Carpet Studios is doing to tell a 2D version story of the 1960 novel, The Passport of Mallam Illia. Ferdy is an accomplished individual, very successful individual. He is the founder and CEO of Magic Carpet Studios, which is a storytelling company aimed at telling authentic African stories through film. He's also the founder and CEO of Imaginarium Creative, which is a digital ecosystem that aims to invest in early stage creative companies in the tech space. He's also a board member of the Slums2School project or initiative, which is aimed at providing access to education to kids in hard to reach areas. So think, chess in slums, similar, that kind of initiative, but focused on education. So join us for Noble Conversations. Let's go. I was looking through your LinkedIn. Did you study political science or something related to?
No. I studied human anatomy, so I was in medical science.
Human, okay.
But my master's was in media and communications. But I would later run for an elected office. I ran for, Americans will call it Congress, but I ran for House of Reps.
Okay.
2019. But like they say in Nigeria, they stole my mandate. I didn't lose.
They stole my mandate.
So that's what every Nigerians who lose elections say, that they stole their mandate. So I prepared that line rather than so we lost an election.
Would you like to reclaim your mandate at some point?
I think I've outgrown that mandate thing. Right now, I'm so excited about what we're building. And just see the possibility and the potential of what it can do in Africa. Right. So I'm now having to sort of like focus on scaling along that line.
Okay. So what inspired you in the first place to run? I want to dive into, like what you're currently doing now. But before that, like what inspired you to run?
So I think that I was, quite frankly, I'm a news analyst. So I used to do news analysis for one of the Smooth FM. And every morning I would go and I would read newspapers, I would read the headlines. And after doing that for a period of 4 years, I realized that Nigeria was stuck in a circle, in a circle of ineptitude, corruption. It didn't seem like the leadership may change, but the problems remain. And I think the problems remain because the challenge was actually a cultural problem that different people came in with the same realities, right? So my decision to run was fundamentally realizing that we needed a different type of leadership, a leadership that was very intentional about moving the needle, right? So if we're talking about 13.5 million Nigerian children not in school, and every year we talk about that number, and every year we talk about that number, every election about that number, and it's getting worse and nothing is being done. I mean, progress would mean if after 2 years you said, okay, 13.5 million kids. Now, 30% of that has reduced. Another year, you hear that it has reduced, but nothing was changing in the way of policy, right? And that was what actually got me very, very interested in work. And I've always been very, very politically aware. So I do
Mm-hmm.
follow politics. I understand pretty much policies, macroeconomy, microeconomy, possibility of creating jobs. And I do think that with the growing population of Nigeria, you'll realize that the IMF said Nigeria needs to create 5 million jobs every year for the next 10 years to keep it sane and safe,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, quite frankly, I don't even think we're creating up to 1 million jobs every year, right? So we're
Mm-hmm.
underperforming. And when you put that side by side, our fast growing population, it's really, really a crisis. Because when you have a
Because
large
it's expected to
population,
reach what,
yeah, go ahead.
to 400, sorry, it's expected to reach, I think, almost 400 million by
Yes, yes,
2050. So double,
yes. So
even more than the US
more than the
population.
US population. So at the end of the day, we're creating, and we're not necessarily being able to, we're not creating as much jobs as we're creating population, right? And then population is an
Mm-hmm.
advantage until it is not skilled. So what makes a
Yeah.
population an asset is that people are skilled, educated, and can add and contribute to the economy. And I don't know that we're doing good in the area of skilling up our people. And for the most part, I also think the curriculum currently being used across Nigerian universities cannot cater to the 21st century workspace. So people are
Mm-hmm.
studying things that are not actually needed. So why don't we revamp that and focus on the top 10 high quality skills that are needed in the world today? So if you're studying sociology, how do you take that sociology to understand consumer patterns, consumer behavior, so that every tech company that is trying to solve for consumer retention, acquisition can hire you? If you're studying psychology,
Mm-hmm.
how do you take your knowledge of demography and your knowledge of profiling users to create customized, tailor-made product fits for the market? Right? So I really do think that there is still a gap. So most times when I speak to students, I always tell them that it is upon you to take yourself from whether you're studying fishery or you're studying
Mm-hmm.
microbiology, and you're asking yourself, how do I become relevant in 21st century? Is to remind yourself and go back, ask yourself, what are my skills and my passion? How can I start to align with what the world needs now? Because if you can
Mm-hmm.
align with what the world needs now, once you bring the skill, the economy will provide the jobs.
Yeah, yeah, and it sounds like well, actually, is that, would you say that's one of the things that motivated you to get involved with Slums to School as
Yeah,
well?
okay. Slum2School was quite interesting because my friend and I used to live together back in the NYC days, and
Mm-hmm.
it was a decision about doing something for a community at the time. So at the end of the day, the Slum2School also gave me a keen insight into how the rural underclass were living, right? Even in a place like Lagos that
Mm-hmm.
was very metropolitan, you had like a large population of people in Makoko not going to school. The kids don't go to school, right? And in fact, there were
Yeah.
schools in those communities, but they were not actually oriented towards appreciating education. Most of the kids will accompany their parents to go fishing or will accompany their parents to go sell in the market or assist their parents, but it wasn't for education. And we wanted to do something
Mm-hmm.
about that. So at the time, the thought process was, do we need a new school or do we get them to appreciate schools? Most of them told us they didn't have school uniform, they didn't have notebooks. So that was what we started with, buying those notebooks and school uniforms, right? And we saw
Mm-hmm.
that when they got what they needed, attendance improved. We started to see like 20% school participation. We started to see 30%, and then we increased that number. And at some point, we started to really support the schools in the communities with things that they needed to function. So it's really been very rewarding, and it's been a decade of just seeing the growth and the impact. I mean, some of the early kids are now in universities. Some of them are graduates doing good stuff. So I mean, that particular work has been its own reward.
Yeah, yeah, I really like that, because I think it, when you're able to see something that you put in effort and you're able to look at it over time, and you see, okay, especially in the case of Slums to School or Slum to School, you see from, secondary or primary school to university, like people are actually, like, it's making a difference in people's
Yeah.
lives, and you're like, yeah, yeah, I'm glad that I was able to be a part of that. So you mentioned being able to be resourceful,
And
like taking what you are learning and saying how can it fit into what is needed in the 21st century,
Very well.
in the world today.
Yes.
So you studied
Yeah.
human
My
anatomy,
first degree. Yeah.
then you studied media and
Yes.
communications, and then you did news analysis, and then now you're telling African stories through Magic Carpet
Mm.
Studios. That, like, walk me through that evolution and how you adapted as you were exploring what you were passionate about, but also what you felt like you were skilled at doing.
So I'm a big believer in the concept of flow. And flow is
Mm-hmm.
actually a concept that we oftentimes describe that for life it's about unfolding opportunities as they present themselves to you. So it's not so much about getting stuck in a pattern of thinking or in a way of approaching life, but allowing life to present to you opportunities as they come. And I think that's something that I've also enjoyed tremendously. So after my
Mm-hmm.
first degree, but while I was on campus, I was an editor. I was publishing a university magazine at the time, and it was very successful. I was known more for my writing and my storytelling than I was known for being a medical student. And I remember when I went to NYC, they had told, and somebody came up to me that they were looking to hire, they wanted a student that understood media to come and head the orientation broadcasting service called OBS. So this was the radio station in camp for the NYC students. And the lady was in my school, but we never met. But she said she was a big fan of the magazine, and she told the PRO of the NYC that she had someone that would be fitting for it, and I became the person. Now I didn't have mass communication background, I didn't have any media
Mm-hmm.
background, but I became the head of the OBS because the lady saw that over the years in just editing magazine, I understood the process of creating news, and I did a fantastic job. I got my newscasters, we would write news and we broadcast the news. We had some shows during the camp, and it was fantastic. But again, it points back to the fact that there's a difference between your curriculum vitae and what I currently now call your creative vitae. And I would say that while
Hmm.
your curriculum vitae is essentially about the
Okay.
things you are learning in terms of the curriculum, right? The creative vitae is what you're contributing, producing, and creating, right? And I think fundamentally, many Nigerians bought into the lie that they were not creative. In fact, for most of us born into Nigeria, the concept of creativity was something we limited to just art, or more often than not, we
Mm-hmm.
limited it to the faculty of art. At best, a method in science. But we didn't understand that creativity was the capacity of the human soul. It was an imprint of every human soul to yearn to reach full potential. So that at any
Mm-hmm.
point in time, your ability to imagine a possibility, to imagine a solution, to imagine a value, to identify a problem, it's even solution, it's even creativity. Your ability to meet a problem with your passion is creativity. So that as much as we are all created in the image and likeness of God, I believe that we are fundamentally
Mm-hmm.
creators. So that when we come to life, the question is not what am I supposed, what can I, it's not whether can I create, am I creative? That's a that's actually a false question. The question
It's
is
how do I
how do I
create?
create? What am I
Yeah.
creating in the moment? So I really think that for me, moving away from NYC, I got into my after my masters, I worked for an advertising company, went for my masters, and I worked in an oil and gas company as a brand communications person. And even while I was still there, I brought in my skills and my passion of storytelling, documentary making, and creative writing to bring a lot of work and projects to the company at the time. And when I transitioned into my first company, Imaginarium, which was a creative technology company where I was working with telecoms to build telco content systems. It was a fun job,
Mm-hmm.
and then I moved from that and I moved into creating Magic Carpet, now an animation storytelling company to focus on exporting feature films, series, and games. Right, so it's been an unfolding, beautiful journey. And I keep telling people that when we free ourselves from the idea that we have a figured path of how we think our life will go, we realize that life invites us and more often than not offers us many exciting opportunities that we could never conspire or manipulate our way into. So it's really
Yeah.
important to recognize flow. When we are in flow, we don't struggle. Flow, we are in sync and we're in season, right? So I'm not having to expect my harvest when I've not sown my seed, but I enjoy my
Yeah.
period of sowing my seed, and then I enjoy my period of harvest. So every season comes with its own beauty.
Mm. No, that's beautiful and encouraging. The reason I say that is, as someone who didn't consider himself a
Mm.
creative initially, I think over time I'm realizing that there are different ways to bring what you are interested in, and combine it
Mhm.
with your skills to serve what people need. And it's not that you may even have those skills initially, but you can develop those skills. So I want to ask, with when you were starting out, you know, with doing, writing, editing, like how did you just jump into it? Did you, like, how did you develop those skills? Were you like reading about it, watching videos? Like how did you, because some people could look at it and say, oh, okay, but I don't know where to start. Okay, these are the skills I need, but I don't have them. So like how did you develop those skills?
So I think that, quite frankly, even amongst my siblings, we read a lot of novels. But I was one of the most avid. I would read a lot of fiction, non-fiction, and I do think that that did give me. I mean, reading more made me a better writer, right? I had to work on
Mm-hmm.
editing and correcting myself because I wasn't that great at it at the time, but I was great at writing. But more often than not, editing was another skill that I had over the years to work on improving, right? Of course, we didn't
Mm-hmm.
have AI at the time to help you synchronize all of those things, but it was something you just had to perfect and do. So I think the reading part was fed my imagination, but I was also, as a child, I was very imaginative. I remember even as early
Mm-hmm.
as 7 and 8, I would tear out portions of my notebook to make novels. I would write novels and novels. I mean, I was a stone collector. I'll pick stones and pebbles from the neighborhood. I would pick them and I'll put them in different cuts. I'll put them in different parks. Like they were. And my mom said, she asked me once, I said, "What are you doing with all these stones?" And I said, "They are my characters. They are life, and they had stories." So I knew that I was actually going to end up somewhere telling these stories. And I haven't really done much yet because animation is a much harder one. So really, now I'm having to
Mm-hmm.
reposition my company so that even on the live action side, I can start to explore what that looks like and how to even start pushing our foot in that direction.
Okay. Okay. So it was something that was kind of already there, but then it was inspired by the books you were
Very
reading.
much, yeah.
Um, and so like that was kind of what you would use to measure, okay, like this is the book I'm reading, this is what I'm trying to create. How does it measure?
It wasn't
Right.
that technical. It wasn't at all that
Okay.
technical. I mean, when I saw a book, I read the book for what the book had to give me in that season. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't make the connection at the time of saying, I'm reading to become a better writer. I read
Okay.
because I enjoyed fiction. That was how I could pass time. It was a hobby for me, reading. But I realized over time that reading was also helping my writing.
It was a
There was a
discovery.
discovery. And then it was much later I now started to figure out, okay, how do I intentionally, like I was even a poet before I understood that it was poetry. I just
Mm.
realized that I would write something on my notebook and I would want it to have a rhyme. But I was a science student. So it wasn't because I was.
Did you rap? Did you try to
I
rap
did.
too?
I did. I did. I mean, I did.
Can we hear some?
No, no, it's not going to be good for you. I don't want to actually. I
Okay.
don't. I mean, this was way back. I mean, at the time, a lot of the rappers that defined those years were mostly Tupac and Biggie. This was much younger years, right?
Mm.
But at the end of the day, I mean, I saw poetry as very, very powerful. I saw it as powerful. I saw it as something that could really, really awaken the consciousness of the people. I saw it as an invitation to discover. I saw it as a clarion call. It was
Mm-hmm.
powerful what poetry can do to emotions and what it can do to people.
Mm-hmm. And so okay. So for you, what, going from that to now Magic Carpet Studios and creating, um telling authentic African stories, like what inspired you to tell African stories specifically?
So I remember reading a lot of African literature and also reading a lot of literature about Africa. And it was
Mm-hmm.
very interesting to me, but I started to think a lot of the writers I read at the time, some of them were writing from a very colonial lens when they write about Africa. But there was also the imperial lens where Africans were writing from a colonized mindset. And it wasn't something that we
Mm.
we could fundamentally identify or understood. It was almost insidious or almost scenario. It was just something in the background, right? But I asked myself, what if Africa was never colonized? What type of stories are we going to tell about ourselves? Or what if Africa had colonized the world? How do we present our identity, our consciousness, our spirituality, our culture, our history? And there was so much to Africa. The pre-colonial Africa had so much to give. The prehistoric Africa also had so much to give, right? So my being a storyteller was, I thought at a very strong level, it was almost a prophetic invitation or a calling to begin to discover what Africa was before the world told us what we were. Before Africa was demarcated, divided, constructed in what it is today, as a people, as a place, as a culture, who were we? And then coming back to rediscover the beauty of the Ubuntu culture, where Africans were inherently communal, and start to identify our mythology, our legends, our empires, and the emperors of the time, our legends, and even the stories about Africa, the folk tales. I realized that there was just so much wealth there. And I think for us, it's easily a civilization we can own. When we bring African story to the world will discover a new way of being itself because Africa had never really been seen.
So highlighting Africa at its core without
Not a
colonization
colonized mindset,
or
yes.
without the colonized
Yes.
mindset. So we talked about bringing African stories to the world. Why do you think, or why is the world hungry for African stories, especially now in this moment?
I think because the beauty of Africa was the birthplace of civilization. I mean, Africa was really, really pretty much fundamental to shaping what music is in the world today. If you trace the jazz music, if you trace even things as whenever African touches the sound, it never stays the same. Whenever Africans touch anything, whether it's dancing or it's whatever we touch expands. And I really think that that's what we're seeing. Wakanda made it possible. I think Wakanda was a signal of a new era for storytelling for every
Yeah.
African content creator and producer. It made it seem like Africans could not just make a film, it could become a blockbuster and a hit. And I think because
Yes.
Wakanda was a story that unapologetically positioned its royalty the way Africans wanted to be. Wakanda came from the same consciousness. What if Africa was never colonized? And I think it's important because we're the only continent, they were only the tribe at the time, they were not very conquered. So I really think that we're seeing again that there's endless repackaging. We are seeing a lot of old classics being redone again by big studios. Like Disney did Lion King after 25 years. They also released Mulan after 24 years. And now they're doing Mufasa, which is an extension of Lion King. And we've seen from this
I think they also did they do Iwadru too? Was that
Yes, but
Disney?
that's a fresh exploration into African stories. So they're exploring as well, which is also a sign to
Okay.
say, okay, yes, they acquired an African IP and they from a comic studio based in the UK, and they created Iwaju. Although as a studio, we did a bit of some concept work in the early days, but I think that is a signal. Even the HBO is also working on another African IP called Iyanu, which was a pre-existing comic series. So we're already seeing that the interest is black. The interest is actually going African. So we Africans who are creators have to now rise to the occasion and come to the table with our stories so that they don't just meet us on their terms, but they meet us on our terms.
Yes, yes. So that we are the ones making the
We're not
stories,
making this.
as opposed to them making the stories and then maybe not representing it in the way that we would want to represent it.
Yes. So representation is a
Yeah.
fundamental aspect of our DNA as a studio. We want to really create African characters. It doesn't have to look like Disney. I mean, anime is a genre on its own. I think Africa can also invent or create what can fundamentally become its own cutout genre. And I think, well, as a studio, we're very committed to that process of discovery.
No, I like that. I like that. So I'm just thinking about Nigeria's creative industry as a whole. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the creative industry in Nigeria contributes about 1 billion to the economy right now. And I think the Minister of Arts, Culture, and Creative Economy had mentioned that the goal is for it to contribute 100 billion to the Nigerian economy by 2030. I think that was, I don't know if that was a prediction based on analysis or if it was a goal of, okay, this is what we're trying to do. But assuming that it's a prediction, okay, this is where the industry is heading. From your perspective, why do you think the industry is growing at such a rate in Nigeria?
First of all, I actually think that's 1 billion annual contribution to GDP. It's pretty much underestimated. And I would say
Okay.
partly because a significant part of the creative industry is largely unmapped and also largely informal. So you would see that in the mapping of the creative sector, there are like 14 sectors under the creative economy, right? And I don't know that we do a lot to touch about it. For instance, music. From the shows that are done across Africa, Afrobeats today is a major export. And if you think about how much Afrobeat is generating and the foreign direct investment that flows into the country from Afrobeat is significant enough to reckon,
Yeah.
right? Then when you think about our fashion, you think about our comedy. So literally a lot of our comedians go on tours in Europe and in the US. Our musicians go on tours in the US and in Europe and in the US. So we're seeing the movie also gaining grounds through the streaming platforms, and movies are really, really becoming well recognized, right? Um, so that the potential that the industry can contribute 100 billion is actually very, very possible. But I do think that all that the industry has accomplished over the years has not been because of policies, but even in spite of them. That even in the absence of policies,
Yes.
the industry has remained resilient, right? So I think it's important for the governments to start to think around some policies from co-production and bilateral trade agreements to tax rebates that can attract producers to produce in Nigeria, attract jobs to Nigeria, to even strengthen our IPs where our intellectual properties can then be collateralized. So I really think that we have an opportunity to truly, truly, you know, identify these gaps and then structure this industry. I'm part of the Nigeria Economic Summit group. And one of the reasons why I volunteered was because I really wanted to be a part of how we shape the next decade of the creative industrialization in Nigeria. I would really say Nigeria is a creative wasteland, not because we don't have the talent, but because the environment has not been conducive enough for the talents to thrive and flourish.
Yeah. Yeah. So you'd say the 1 billion is
Yes,
underestimated and the 100 billion is definitely
possible. It's
feasible.
very feasible.
Okay. 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 So when you look at animation, because you mentioned there are about 14 components of that creative industry. So when you look at animation, like what role do you see animation contributing or playing in that growth?
It's a catalyst. I think animation more than anything else. I mean, I'm working on I'm working on projects now. We're developing projects that we have to work with skit makers and comedians. We're working with musicians. We're working with actors and actresses. We're working with fashion people. So animation, because it has more exportable value, I can actually create projects where I can tap into other sectors of the creative economy, right? And that's why I feel that it will catalyze it because animation is an export, and two, it has more success in terms of its return. It has more bandwidth in terms of successes than just a regular film. So I think it's important for us to also keep that in mind. And animation is pretty much also about expanding the understanding of the people because the storytelling is film, is cinematic, right? So I really think that,
Yeah.
and yeah, I really think that animation sits very well at that. If you go to India, for instance, the potential of animation to create jobs is humongous. Almost 40% of the Indian economy comes from outsourcing, and a significant part of that outsourcing comes from sectors like animation. You can find an animation studio with about 3 to 5,000 people working like a factory works. And I mean, no studio has the scale of that number. I mean, we are just building to that, but no studio in Nigeria has that kind of scale. Like, so it's fundamentally okay for us to start to think about the potential of what we're doing. But animation, like I said, is pretty much a catalyst to fast track the growth of other creative sectors by designing an entire ecosystem where every of these sectors can play a part in what is produced and exported.
I really like what you're saying about animation because I'm thinking with that growth, the number of Nigerian, first of all, Nigerian kids that will watch these animated shows, right?
Yeah.
Because as growing up, I didn't watch any. I don't remember watching any like Nigerian or African like focused like
Mm.
animated, movies. And so I'm just thinking of how that could shape the mindset of a young Nigerian child growing up.
Mm.
Um, and watching that. Um, so okay, you've mentioned that multidisciplinary collaboration. I think I saw you mentioned this online. That multidisciplinary collaboration across the creative
Yeah.
industry is a form of capital. So when you say form of capital, like what are you? How do you like? Can you expand on
So
that?
the reality of capital, we have a very narrow idea of what capital can be. For instance, we are
Mm-hmm.
collaborating with a couple of studios. There is this company in the US. They wanted to produce an animated movie, and they didn't necessarily have all the money. So we went into a collaborative effort where they were able to assess a reduced budget in exchange of certain
Mm-hmm.
percentage profit, right? So it's a collaborative effort. So you don't have to raise all the money. You can leverage, but for you to actually be able to see collaboration as capital, you need to have almost an enlightened self-interest. And you also need to a have that sense of conscious business thinking, where you are not just thinking from the lens of I, but from the lens of we. And when we start to
Mm-hmm.
embrace that idea that how can we win with no one losing? Most people's idea of business is competition, and in that idea of competition is that I have to lose for you to win. But what we're advocating in the conscious era of business is actually not anybody losing, but how can we all win? So that the competition
Yeah.
is not one that is about losing market, but about distributing value in such a way that the market gains, everybody gains, there's improvement, there is excellence, right? So everybody's actually trying to outcompete in excellence, outcompete themselves in creativity. But it's not so much about getting
Mm-hmm.
monopoly over the market in such a way that you crowd people out. So we want to be able to rethink competition, not from the lens of just dominating the market, but from the lens of
Yeah.
owning a dimension of the market and owning the space of the market. That in a sense you have a niche, but you're also inspiring creativity, excellence in the others because they understand that they have to compete at that level too. So we must see the positive side of competition. Competition is not a negative word. It can have a positive
Yeah.
undertone, right? And I think that's how I perceive business thinking today.
So it's like bringing different people from different aspects of, or different industries or disciplines to pull together resources, and at the same time, like you're competing, but it's not like, oh, I have to win and you lose.
Yes.
It's like, okay, let's compete and see how we can produce the best product
Yes.
for what the market
You're
needs.
right.
Okay, okay. So when you're thinking about disciplines that would provide the most, like what top three disciplines would you say provide the most cross-functional support to the creative industry? Because
Mm.
there's health, there is, education, there is, agriculture,
Mm.
different, all these different industries that could benefit from the creative industry or could contribute to the creative industry. But if you could only pick three, I know it's impossible to, three alone is not enough.
Mm.
But if you could only pick three, which would you
No, I
pick?
would not necessarily approach it from asking what industry. Everything that needs to be sold requires the creative industry to connect to people. So at the
Mm,
core of marketing is creative industry. The videos that will be created, the arts that will be created, the design that will be done, the scripting of the story. For you to some great products can be successful as a product but fail in marketing. So I
yeah.
think that marketing is not a non-essential. Marketing is the fundamental essential in every industry, in every business. So fundamentally, that's where I would say the creative layers into everything, right? So
Okay.
it's not which top three industry requires creativity more than others, but how can every industry begin to recognize how important creativity is in part of the ecosystem and begin to make room for creativity to be seen along their value chain as an essential part of what they do.
Okay. Okay. Definitely. Definitely. So one of the things I've been following slightly is the work that you're doing with the Passport of Mallam Illia.
Mm.
Is popped up on my social media every now and then. So the marketing is working. that was how I came across you in the first place.
Okay.
So Magic Carpet, is currently working on creating a 2D version of or 2D film of the Passport of Mallam Illia 1960 novel. I personally haven't read the book yet.
Mhm.
But could you tell us more about maybe like what was the book about briefly, and then why did your team decide to work on this story?
Okay, so the book is about is a story of love, war,
Mm-hmm.
right? It touches on many things. This was 19th century Kano, and for us, we think that the northern part of Nigeria is the least told part when it comes to storytelling in a sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
We wanted a story that could really, really touch on something fundamental, and this was during the colonial invasion. So we thought it had a universal appeal because it wasn't just about a story that was about Nigeria. It was historical. There was the colonial aspect. You were also seeing the
Yeah.
colonial invasion. There was also free country. There was Mecca, which is Saudi Arabia, and there was Cameroon. So we thought that from a very interesting perspective, the story was expansive enough to connect pretty much with everyone. But the story was about two
Mm-hmm.
lovers who actually, against a very strong-willed young lady, who was almost difficult to stay in a relationship or in a marriage and would eventually be put up by her dad, right? And there was a game of Sanchi where all the men would come to fight. And the best man or the strongest man was not deemed fit to marry the princess. And so eventually, this guy beat the villain to marry her. But the story went on and on. Where at some point there was the night of war when the British invaded Kano, and there was a tragedy. And I wouldn't tell you what the
Mm-hmm.
tragedy was, but after when the tragedy
Okay.
happened, so that there was no spoilers, um, it became a pursuit for vengeance. But even while the story was really about the contention and the struggle for love, acceptance, healing, and also forgiveness, on the fundamental level, the Passport of Mallam Illia was also the evolution of the human soul. It was against our shadow self. How today, each and every one of us today carry within us a shadow side or a shadow self that we never quite confront. And that the real enemy is not always out there, but it's always within.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to conquer your shadow is truly how you get liberated. So it's a story of liberation, of evolution, of enlightenment, of rediscovering the capacity of the human soul to heal, right? And it's a
Yeah.
it's quite exciting for us because it touches on pretty much some exciting points that we're happy to share with the world.
So okay, without because you said no spoilers, so I don't want to ask questions that will lead to spoilers. But what aspect of the story is being portrayed, in the film that you would say is not necessarily told in the book? Because I mean, I'm sure like as you're exploring filmmaking,
Mm.
um, you probably make a few changes here and there,
Mhm.
um, but without spoilers.
Well, I think I would tell you one. So this was 19th century Kano. A lot of the women in the book, I felt the book didn't do enough deep dive into their character and into their motivations and their choices. But at the level of the movie,
Hmm.
we expanded on those. We also wanted to get into those into their thinking. So there was that part too where we had to really explore and deep into some of the female characters. We had a few additional characters that we felt was going to lighten the entire experience and make it comical and fun to watch. So we took some creative liberty to bring color. And there's a musical aspect to the book to the movie, although it's not a musical per se, but there are musical aspects to bring more color and magic.
Okay, okay. Is that so? More color and magic? Is it because it's Magic Carpet
I would think it is.
Studios? Is that okay? Okay.
Mhm.
And so, right now, from what I saw, you're raising right now. I think about two. Correct me if I'm wrong, but about 250,000 in completion. 250,000 completion fund for this project.
No, it's actually a $500,000 completion fund. I mean, we raised some money
Okay.
already, but yeah, it's about $500,000 completion fund. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, like for those who might be, interested in investing, Like what ways would this fund help complete the project, and like what timeline are we
So
looking at based on that?
we're definitely releasing next year. At some point, we are trying to
Okay.
see if we could make December release possible, but that's not possible. There's still a bit of work to be done, but it's coming out next year, most certainly. And like I said,
Okay.
we are doing both cinema, and we also eventually going to be doing streaming. Now, let me tell you a little bit about cinema. On record, we have about 12.5 million people working in animation industry. Now, I will
Mm-hmm.
tell you, on average, even very independent animated projects tend to do almost $5.5 million ticket sales in box office. So what that means is 5.5 million tickets. So, but I can say the reason why animation tends to do that is because in 1,000 movies, you might have like five animation to live action. So there is not always a lot of animation. So when people make choices, there is a sense that a lot of people would make choice because of the diversity and the differentiation, right?
Yeah.
But also for us, we as a studio, we see it for entertainment, but we also see it for learning. So because we run a studio, whenever there is an animated thing, we're like, wow, that was crazy, right? So in the 12.5 million people work in animation, you pretty much have almost a 50, 60% possible ratio that these guys will go see your film. And
Yeah.
and that's part of why animation, you must do cinema before you do streaming, right? Because it's still a lifeblood for most cinema release. Europe, a
Mm-hmm.
ticket sale is about $9 for tickets in the UK or in Europe or in the US, right? So if you think about that $9 for 5.5 million ticket, that's kind of size you might make. But again, there are all those deduction from the cinema. So in a lot of ways, I think because Passport of Mallam Illia is a movie that touches pretty much in different parts of Africa. The Tuareg and Hausa Fulani culture is very well known in places like North Central Africa, the Sahel region. Is
Mm-hmm.
also pretty much touches on aspect all the way to Saudi Arabia. I think we can also connect in cultures like Qatar, Dubai, right, the Middle East,
Mm-hmm.
right. It's something that can really sell very much in the Middle East, and it can also move in places like India and China because of the 2D artistic quality that we carry. And there's also a 3D side to it, though, right? For us in Nigeria here, we really think that it's going to do very well in the box office because it touches everywhere in Nigeria. I mean, it was written by a man from the southeast. Cyprian was,
Yeah.
I think they said he was a mentor to Tino Achebe and the rest. So he was a much older writer, right, with such strong legacy, right? And then it was about the North. I mean, the North till date, there has been no movie in cinema that has been done for them. And then, of course, in Lagos here, we celebrate the use of technology and our softwares of animation and innovation to tell stories. So there is something there for everyone.
Mm. Mm. So okay, well, so you said next year.
Yes.
Is that middle of next year? Is that
Yes, we would
beginning?
say on or before the end of next year, but middle looks more plausible than early next year.
Okay. 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 No, this is a huge project. So I mean, I like that you're undertaking it. What is something you wish more people knew about the project that they don't know,
The,
or that you think they don't know?
I think the potential of the project, because we are pioneering. I mean, Iwaju was actually a Nigerian title, but it wasn't a Nigerian film because it's a Disney
Mm-hmm.
project. So it was paid for by Disney, produced in Canada. So because this is a project that is being done end to end here in Lagos, Nigeria, and
Mm-hmm.
everyone that is investing, the greatest opportunity is that all of the talents that is working on this project, we train them. So this is an opportunity for them to really, really enjoy and earn from the skill they've acquired, right? So, it's
Mm-hmm.
such an exciting opportunity to be creating one of Africa's first projects from the very place here in Nigeria. Animation is most animation from Lion King that has been done has not always been done here in Africa. That we're doing this in
Mm-hmm.
Africa is in itself a true testament for Africa that the time of Africa has come.
Mm. And you mentioned that about 12.5 million people working
Mm.
animation. Is this globally?
Yeah,
I'm
it's a
guessing this is
global number.
globally,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay, okay, okay. Now another thing I want to explore is what is something you wish more people knew about you
Ah,
that they don't currently know?
I think that I think in the early days I was a very disruptive thinker, so I could easily be
Mm-hmm.
misunderstood, right? I live in the future. My mind is always working and thinking and dreaming. But I'm also I'm very, very passionate about my faith. I'm a family man with
Mm-hmm.
3 kids. I love my kids. I love my family. And I'm a very passionate person about Nigeria. I love Africa. I love Nigeria. I love family, right? And I think those are areas where I've seen. I don't know that it's easily seen or felt, right? And in the early days, yes, I could be very optimistic. I could dream, but I've had to mellow over the years as we mature to realize that sometimes you have to stay.
Mellow, mellow.
Yeah, yeah, mellow, mellow. I think to mellow as we mature.
Yeah.
I think that, yeah, so the years have been good to me as well.
So how do you strike that balance between living in the future, but basically pulling the future into the present? Um, because like especially a lot of us that are younger, like we're constantly, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this, I want to do that. But how do you like make the future the present?
I think that I had to learn it over time, right? Because
Okay.
sometimes I'm talking to people and they get overwhelmed because they are seeing, I can be talking a decade in a day, and they are hearing a lot that needs to be done. But over the years, it comes with discipline. I also understand that the future is in the thoughts, the past is in the
Mm-hmm.
thoughts, and the present is also in the thoughts. So I'm actually very intentional about always learning to be in the present when I'm with people. But when I'm alone, I can
Yeah.
dream. But wherever I'm with people, I have to be present to and be intentional and pay full attention to being there and there and there and now for them and for whatever the conversation is unfolding. So it's been an art in itself that I've had to perfect or learn over time.
Mhm. Okay. And look at you because you mentioned being passionate about your faith, family, and Nigeria. So, what role would you say your faith, family, and Nigeria have played in grounding you as you seek or and pursue all these endeavors that you're doing?
Grounding. I think my faith was
Yeah.
very much an anchor for me. I've had some major losses. I've had some not so good days. I've had some things that have always been almost nerve wracking. But when I realized what pulled me through is the realization that all that happens to me, it's only a passing phase. But at the core of my being, I am complete. I am enough. I am. I
Mm-hmm.
am. And today, with all the successes we've had, there is nothing I will lose that'll make life lose its meaning. And there is nothing I can attain that'll make life more exciting than it already is to me. I've learned to
Mm-hmm.
love life even in the mundane and in the miraculous. I've learned to expect life even in the moments and in the memory. So it's really for
Mm-hmm.
me the gift of knowing that how do you find peace in a raging storm? Faith. How do we find joy even in the most deafening grief? Faith. How do we
Mm-hmm.
find company even in our lonely moments? Faith. So faith answers to the very deep need of the human soul. And for many people that haven't walked through the dark night of the soul, they might never know how important it is to have belief that transcends, right? That gives you,
Mm-hmm.
that sustains you even in the moment, in your dark moments, and that gives you the ray of hope and the ray of light, even in the toil. Faith is
Mm-hmm.
always that ray of light.
Mm. What about family?
Family is also is our why. I mean, why do we work so hard? Why do we do the things we do? Everything we do, everything we build because of family. We build for family. And I think that, the gift of family is to have a home to return to and to have people to share your moments with you. For many of us,
Mm-hmm.
I'm learning now that the greatest gift I can give to my kids is not that I provide, but I would provide, but that I'm present. And that
Mm-hmm.
is not just to raise my kids, but to raise their consciousness, to help them begin to think and see life from a vantage point of view that helps them to understand there is more abundance in the world than there is scarcity, that they are more
Mm-hmm.
connected to God than they are separate from Him, and they are more loved by their parents and by God than they are afraid of being sent to hell should they do something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That love is the greatest force in the world, and family is the place to discover that love and to live it out.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that because I think it's easy to forget our why. Like we're doing all these things and we forget, our family, like without our family, without having people that we can share this with, it's just, oh, okay, we did this and that's it. But we need to be able to pass on lessons to, and also spending time with those that we love. So looking at Nigeria, where do you see Nigeria in the next 10 years?
I think that question is a difficult one to answer because I would like to give you my best answer that I think that Nigeria has such um, potential to truly become a destination for the world, to become a cultural world power, the cultural capital of the world in setting the next dispensation for the creative economy of the world. But again, and my prayer, this dream comes with a prayer that we
Yeah.
will get our leadership right, and that over time we'll have the right people who can come and guide and lead us in the way that we ought to go.
Okay. Okay. So optimism, but cautious
Cautious
optimism.
optimism, yes.
Cautious. Okay. Okay. So, okay. Now let me ask a question that might be slightly easier to answer. I don't know if this will be easier, but where do you see magic carpets in the next 10 years?
Also, I see very easily we are building to become like the Pixar of Africa, to become a company that is known for innovative storytelling. I mean, we see having our theme parks where we can create cultural experiences around our stories where people can connect and bond. We see a very powerful line for different products. We have a kids market that we're planning to launch into. We also want to be known for some of the top earning themes that at least top 10 themes should be owned by Magic Carpet in the next decade. We also want to see a possible IPO where we can do an IPO launch further down the line and raise more capital. So
Yeah.
I think that's what I see. I see a grand, epic, beautiful, glorious empire of storytelling.
I like that. Empire of storytelling. I like that. So where can our audience find this empire of storytelling? Like where can we find you and your
So
work?
you can check us out. We are Magic Carpets Magic_Carpets on Instagram. We are Magic Carpets on YouTube. We are also on Twitter. We also have Magic Carpet Studio, our website. And on all of these platforms, you can check us out and stay plugged in as we evolve together.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, come. I want to tell you something. Come and say something. If you got value from that noble conversation, let us know in the comment section below and let us know what you liked. But don't stop there, oh. Don't stop there. Share this video with someone else you think will also get value from this. Don't be selfish. Don't be selfish. Because if you share it with someone else you think will also get value, what that does is it helps us reach more people with the same value that you've received. That's one. Two, it also gives us more visibility to bring on more guests that you would enjoy listening to and getting insights from. And so, let's go. Come join us, comment, and share. Let's go.